Jason, Jason! He grunted, jerking awake as the voice intruded. Beside him, Phoebe slept. A half-moon-shaped mark on her neck was still red and slightly inflamed. It would heal quickly, leaving only a perfect pink scar. Jason leaned close, breathing deep. Her lilac and sage scent was stronger than ever, but now also carried an undertone of dogwood. Now that she was marked, she would carry his scent, regardless of how often they were together. She was truly his and only his. Jason, he sighed, yeah, Ma. Finally, I've been calling and calling. I was asleep, it's not even 6 yet. Yes, and you are usually up by 5. So I slept in a day, I'm entitled. That's not the point, I almost woke Phoebe to find you. Don't, it was a big night, what does that mean? I'll tell you when I see you, are you in the kitchen? Of course. I'll be out in a moment. Jason slowly disengaged from Phoebe, careful not to wake her. He stood and stumbled, suddenly light-headed. Placing a hand on the wall, he paused as he regained his equilibrium. His mind was swirling. It almost felt like he was drunk, though he hadn't imbibed a thing except her. Lobo remained oddly silent, as if in a deep sleep, almost as deep as when he was still dormant. Making his way to the bathroom, Jason splashed water on his face to try to drive the vestiges of sleep away. Relieving himself, he ducked into the closet for sweats before stepping out. Phoebe still slumbered as he checked her once more, burying his nose in her thick mane of brown hair, and breathed deep before stepping out and heading to the kitchen where his mother enjoyed her customary tea. Mom. Morning, sweetie. What's that? What? Nora was on her feet in an instant, pulling his arm and turning aside his head to get a good look at the red mark on his neck. Jason grimaced. You're marked, she exclaimed. Yeah, that's what mates do. Jason, you were supposed to wait until the Luna ceremony. It's tradition. A tradition I never liked, Jason leaned against the counter. Other mates mark themselves in private, but I'm an alpha, so it has to be a spectacle? Nora frowned. Jason had always been private by nature. Though everyone knew of his longing for his fated mate, no one knew the lengths he went to ensure that when she was found, she would never feel insecure or wonder about his devotion. From the way he organized the closet to the way he arranged for a private room for her to explore her hobbies, whatever they might have been, everything was made ready for her. Currently, that room was undergoing renovations to be turned into a library, a fact that everyone struggled to keep secret from Phoebe. Jason sacrificed a lot for his pack, but his dedication to his Luna was not something he would ever compromise. Besides, you know Phoebe's self-conscious about all of this? Yes, I know, Nora sighed. Phoebe was everything Nora hoped for in Jason's mate. She was intelligent, kind, strong, and gentle, but she also bore deep scars from her rejection. Whether Phoebe knew it or not, she had built walls to protect herself, opening up to very few. Jason patiently scaled those walls and was now busy taking them apart, brick by brick. Nora couldn't be prouder with how much care he showed his Luna. And part of that stemmed from his desire not to repeat his father's mistakes. Jackson had been a strong alpha and a devoted mate in his way. He never betrayed her once they were together, but their first meeting was not an image she could forget. What hurt more was the fact he kept the she-wolf around. While Nora usually remained at home, Blanche traveled with Jackson when he attended meetings. Whenever she brought it up, he'd only shrug and said, Blanche was a good warrior. She never felt the pains of betrayal, so she knew he was faithful despite the fact Blanche flaunted their private time together. Nora still recalled one meeting in particular that had been held at their pack. The visiting alphas and Lunas had been surprised to learn Jackson found his fated mate. Several shot her sympathetic looks, clearly believing he was cheating on her. It was almost as if she was the mistress rather than his Luna. Ashamed, she had taken the only revenge available to her and shunned his romantic advances. She made herself a private bedroom and refused to share his bed, even going as far as to contact their pack doctor to find a means of alleviating heat pains medically. Denied access to his mate, Jackson flew into raging fits followed by depression. Nora waited for the betrayal pains, but they never came. Jackson remained faithful. It was Blanche who lost her patience in the end. If the warrior had simply challenged Nora for her title, it would have been one thing. She was confident she could hold her own in a fair fight, but Blanche never played fair. The warrior incited two of Jackson's previous partners to attack their Luna together, nearly killing her. If not for the Gamma's intervention, she certainly wouldn't have survived. Jackson, or rather his wolf, flew into a rage upon hearing of it. At the time, Nora had been surprised he even left Blanche behind, since he always took her on his trips. Only later did she learn his beta convinced him to do so. Apparently, the beta overheard several wolves talking about how much they pitied Nora because of how he flaunted his affair in front of her. Only then did Jackson begin to understand the image he created by keeping Blanche close. For the first time, he left the warrior behind, and it was enough to incite Blanche to seek revenge on her Luna. Nora still remembered how potent Jackson's anger was the day he found her in the hospital, under guard, as she recovered from the attack. After hearing the story, he rushed to the cells to deal with her attackers. She thought he was going to kill them. It would have been better if he did. Instead, he let them live and stay in the pack without further punishment, as if a few nights in a cell were punishment enough. After that day, she lost faith in him. Once she was out of the hospital, she hand-selected 2 guards from the elite warriors, making them swear loyalty to her above all, including their alpha. She refused to go anywhere without them. She neither trusted her mate nor her pack. Discord wormed its way into the pack's unity, weakening their bonds. Jackson begged and pleaded for her to reconsider. She gave him 2 options. 1, banish her attackers from the pack, or 2, reject her and take his slut as his chosen mate instead. He refused both options, and they proceeded with the Luna ceremony, but it had been a joyless affair, much to his parents' disappointment. Nora knew her duties and performed them, but she allowed herself to feel no love for the pack biding its time to kill her. Jackson needed an heir, and she complied, but no amount of coaxing on his part awakened her passion. Her wolf, in pain from denying their mate bond, agreed with her. The only love she and her wolf allowed themselves to feel was for the pup growing within. It was their only joy, and even that was almost taken away. Once her pregnancy was confirmed, Jackson doted on her, desperately trying to build the bridge he burned, and Nora was very close to accepting him again, even considered getting rid of her bodyguards. Thank goddess, she didn't. Blanche came at her again, this time with a silver blade, intent on not just killing her, but the pup as well. Nora was 5 months along, almost full term, if not for her guards who knew how the attack would have played out. Nearly losing his mate for a second time, as well as his pup, Jackson's wolf took over completely and killed Blanche without hesitation. But it was too little too late. Nora's faith was gone. Only her pup mattered. All the love she denied her mate was given to Jason. She doted on him and raised him carefully, as well as Lucille, whose birth was quite the shock, and the result to an unfortunate combination of alcohol, passion, and her heat. By the time Jason was 10, the pack's bonds were beginning to fray. Infighting was becoming commonplace. Sometimes it seemed like they were all dancing on a powder keg. Without his mate, Jackson's wolf deteriorated, and Jackson himself seemed to age faster than normal. When Jason's wolf awakened on his 14th birthday, the wolf was already dominant. At age 17, it was clear Jason already eclipsed his father, and the pack bonds began to knit around him. Jason took on more and more duties, further solidifying his rank and drawing in the pack as only a true alpha could. There was only one thing missing: his Luna. An alpha could unify a pack, but only a Luna could bring a sense of belonging. 2 sides of the same coin, but incomplete until they were together. Jason had faith his fated mate would be his perfect match, and he was determined not to make his father's mistakes. So he searched and waited, accepting no others in her place. There certainly was no shortage of she-wolves vying for his attention. Females were naturally attracted to strong males. Jason turned them all away. Jackson worried his son was putting too much pressure on himself, and Jason did not appreciate his advice. Just as there was a disconnect between Jackson and Nora, there was also a disconnect between father and son. It was a wound neither managed to heal before Jackson's inevitable passing. Jason hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. Nora and Lucille attended Jackson's final moments without him. Lucille had been torn apart by her father's passing. Jackson doted on her like a princess, so they shared a strong bond. She probably still didn't understand the gulf that existed between Jason and their father. Nora sighed, pushing away her thoughts. Jason was pensive and probably thinking over the same memories as she was. He had waited so long to find his mate, but from what Nora saw, Phoebe was worth the wait. The pack had been reluctant to accept her, fearing a repeat of their previous Alpha and Luna's tepid relationship. Nora was quite certain Phoebe had no idea what the reason was behind the cool welcome, if she noticed at all. Regardless, she quickly won the hearts of her new pack with not only her motherly tendencies but her fiercely protective nature. Her first day with her new pack, Phoebe ran to help an Omega without hesitation. She leapt to the other's defense, retaliating against Katrina in spectacular fashion. Whether the pack realized it or not, in that moment they were officially put on notice. Their Luna was among them. As much as the pack tried to remain aloof, her influence seeped into their bond. A new sense of calm and reassurance pervaded their wolf souls. It was like a shift in gravity. Instead of revolving around a single star, their Alpha, they now revolved around two. Nora sensed and saw Phoebe's insecurity, though she was good at hiding it. Perhaps due to her low rank in her former pack, or maybe her rejection, Phoebe doubted her ability to lead despite being a natural. Nora saw it again when Phoebe visited the daycare. She helped the she-wolves reorganize supplies and the space to create areas for certain activities. Reading in one corner, arts and crafts in another, a place for schooling, and a mat for games and napping. Prior to her arrival, the she-wolves largely let the pups free play, with occasional attempts to educate them using workbooks some 10 years old. Phoebe created a daily lesson plan for the she-wolves to follow. The pups now had designated times during the day when they would follow lessons, reading time, snacks, and nap time, as well as free play. She ordered new, up-to-date workbooks with various ages in mind, as well as requested a set of computers and educational software. Even without her Luna authority and influence, Phoebe's higher education and expertise would have given her all the necessary clout to make the changes she desired. Werewolves didn't often seek education beyond primary school, but Nora had already heard several now discussing the possibility applying to the pack for financial aid to allow them to attend college courses. Jason was going to have to put serious thought into some sort of scholarship program and standardize a method for pack members to apply for educational funds. Nora knew he had been playing with the idea for a while, but if he wanted to keep up with his Luna, he would have to implement it soon. Human financial aid was unavailable to werewolves, vampires, fae, and other supernatural species. Another reason wolves generally didn't seek higher education. Though packs were often quite well off, individual wolves rarely had more wealth than the average human, a fact most humans didn't understand. However, that also meant there was plenty of opportunity for packs to support their members, and there was no reason not to aid their educational goals. Phoebe had more than enough clout to inspire and encourage her new pack. Wherever she led, they would follow. Jason's devotion ensured theirs, and it would only grow stronger now that she was marked. Nora had wanted Jason to wait until the Luna ceremony because it would cement her bond with the pack. The effect would be even more dramatic under the full moon. But she understood his aversion to displaying such intimate actions in public. What was done was done. Phoebe's bond with the pack was firmly in place, and her influence would grow. It would be gradual, like a wave rolling into the shore as opposed to a tidal wave. In the long run, perhaps this was for the best. Nora had no doubt Phoebe would heal the pack's strained bonds. She was the Luna they needed. "I know you don't like public spectacles," Nora finally said, "but you know this pack has been suffering for a long time. Your father and we never connected. Part of the blame can certainly be laid at her father's feet, but it can also be laid at mine," Jason growled. As far as he was concerned, the fault lay with his father. He didn't see any reason for her to take the responsibility on herself. If not for me, the pack would have welcomed Phoebe with open arms the moment she arrived. "Mom, Phoebe is the Luna this pack has been desperate for. She'll heal them in more ways than they know, and she'll heal you too." "Mom, I don't need healing." Yes, you do." Nora stared at him knowingly. "I still have your father's letter. It's on my desk waiting for you." There is nothing he could say that I would want to hear, Nora sighed. Jason refused to see his father right up to the end. Not even Lucille's begging and pleading stirred him. Jackson had been too weak to hold a pen, so dictated his final words to Nora for her to give to Jason. Yet he had never asked to see it, and even threatened to burn it if she ever dared give it to him. I called you because I felt something odd in the pack's bond, but since you and Phoebe marked each other, the explanation is obvious. Jason nodded. Once marked, Phoebe's rank in the pack was cemented. Her influence within would be more pronounced, and the pack would lean on her for comfort. He only hoped it wouldn't be too overwhelming. I hope this won't keep her in bed all day. We plan to make brownies with the pups. Brownies? Yes. Phoebe's been spending most of her time in the daycare. I think she's familiar with most all of the pups and their families now, and she's completely reorganized it from a glorified babysitting facility to a full-blown preschool. Jason smiled. Ben had given him reports and handed him Phoebe's special requests. He approved them all, letting her work with an unlimited budget to her new syllabus in place. Nothing was too much. Suddenly, he frowned. "What is it?" Nora asked. "I think Phoebe's waking up. You better go to her. She might be disorientated at first." Not only could an alpha's aura be overpowering, a Luna's bond to the pack was just as strong. For a wolf who came from lower ranks, it could all be overwhelming to be inundated with the pack's most intimate needs. Grimacing, Jason nodded and retreated to his room without delay. There, he found Phoebe still in bed. She sighed contentedly with her nose pressed into his pillow. Chuckling, he slipped back into bed and pulled her into his embrace. She snuggled into him with a smile. "I take it you are feeling good this morning?" he asked. She sniffed. "You smell a little like sage now." "Of course I do. When mates mark each other, they take some of each other's scent so everyone knows they belong to each other." "I like it." "Me too, Angel." "What time is it?" 6:15. "Oh." Phoebe stiffened, jerking awake. "I promised the pups we'd make brownies." "So I heard. We can steal a few more minutes, though." A few more minutes with you usually becomes an hour." Jason laughed. "Can you blame me? When I have the world's more gorgeous she-wolf as my mate?" Phoebe blushed. "I'm not." He silenced her with a kiss, and "Yes, Angel, you are." "You wanted to see me, Alpha?" "Yes, come in, Garrison," Jason nodded as the warrior hesitantly entered. Garrison was young, several years younger than Jason, so they had minimal contact during school and training. He was certainly not lacking in physique nor looks, with sandy-colored hair and hazel eyes. In fact, Jason would have been jealous, considering his own brown hair and eyes were rather ordinary. There was only one reason Katrina would have rejected such a mate, and that was based solely on rank. But even that did not answer all of Jason's lingering questions. After all, Katrina was the daughter of an alpha and Thomas's only heir. He would have accepted any mate of hers as his successor. She would still have been Luna to one of the most powerful packs in the world, which meant her true obsession was not rank, but Jason himself. The thought made him uncomfortable. "Alpha?" Garrison approached the desk with a note of anxiousness, tempered by confusion and curiosity, pulling Jason from his wandering thoughts. "Have a seat." Jason leaned back in his chair. "It has come to my attention that you were Katrina's fated mate." Garrison paused midway through the motion of sitting. He glanced nervously at Luke and Ben, both comfortably seated on the couch, before plopping into the chair, and answered, "Yes, Alpha." There was no need to ask how Jason found out. It was no secret Alpha Thomas and Katrina had unexpectedly visited and left just as suddenly. Jason had waited a day to consider what he should do with his recently gained knowledge. "I won't ask you about the rejection," Jason said. "If you wanted to tell us about that, you would have by now. What I do want to ask, did your rejection have anything to do with the dangerous assignments you volunteered for?" Garrison hesitated. Jason wasn't using his alpha tone, so answering was wholly voluntary, but he knew better than to lie. With a sigh, he said, "I guess I figured if my mate didn't want me, there wasn't any reason for me to stay around." "And now?" "The goddess granted me a second chance," Garrison said. "She means everything to me, her and our pup." Jason's mouth twitched with a smile. If not for the fact Phoebe was in his life, he would have been jealous. Finally, he said, "I wish you would have spoken up sooner. We could have helped, supported you at least. Rejection is no simple thing for a wolf to recover from. Garrison nodded. He had been far too embarrassed. Besides, Katrina made it no secret she wanted Jason for her mate. Thankfully, Jason hadn't been interested, but it still hurt to compare himself to his own alpha and find himself lacking. What exactly would you have done if I did take Katrina for my mate? Luke snorted a laugh, and Ben sputtered out his drink, exclaiming, "You gotta warn someone when you're gonna make a joke like that." "Ignore them," Jason shook his head as Garrison gave him a curious look. "Well, I kind of assumed I wouldn't be around by then." Jason sighed. He guessed he wasn't surprised by that answer, but he hated to think he could have lost one of his pack members like that. Finally, he said, "There is one more thing I need to discuss with you. Alpha? I want to make a special protection detail for Phoebe. Members of it will be exempt from regular patrol work, but their training load will be doubled. Their sole concern will be Phoebe's security both here on pack grounds and when she travels. Shopping trips, excursions into the woods, pack meetings, everything." Garrison's interest peaked as soon as Jason mentioned his Luna. He didn't mind going on patrols, but ensuring the Luna's safety was a major concern. Blue Moon was one of the oldest packs and therefore had a long list of enemies and rivals. As a warrior, Garrison didn't know much about the political landscape of the wolf packs, but he knew enough to stay out of it. "Considering your achievements as well as your training, you would make a good choice for the lead position of this detail." "Yes, Alpha," Garrison said. His eagerness made Jason raise a brow at his sudden fervor. "I mean, I would gladly accept such an honor." "I was going to say you are a good choice for squad leader, provided your mental state is stable. I don't want a loose cannon with a death wish guarding my Luna." "Of course, Alpha. I promise I would never do anything to endanger the Luna's life. Could I select my own team?" Jason considered the request. Originally, he planned to choose the warriors himself, but it occurred to him Garrison may have better insight. It was the nature of warriors to form bonds of camaraderie with each other and share information with each other that never reached their commander's ears. As such, Garrison would have a good idea who in the ranks had the most dedication to their Luna, as well as who would work best together. "Yes," Jason said after a moment. "The detail will consist of 6 to start. They will also be expected to ensure the safety of our pups, both adopted and conceived." Garrison nodded. He met Blake and Emma when he dropped his own pup at the pack daycare. Despite being orphaned at such a young age, both seemed well-adjusted and happy, no doubt due to the Luna's care and attention. It was clear the pups had already firmly won the former Luna's heart as well. Like everyone else, Garrison hadn't expected Jason to go as far as to officially adopt the orphans, but it was nice to see a gentler side to their Alpha. "Alpha, if I may ask," Garrison hesitated, knowing it was dangerous to question his Alpha. "Our Luna. You won't reject her, right?" "What?" Jason snapped, growling low. His eyes swirled amber as Lobo pressed forward. "I don't mean, it's just..." Garrison stuttered under the weight of Jason's aura, baring his neck in submission. "I've survived a rejection myself, so I know what it's like to have half your soul ripped out from you. No wolf could survive it twice, and Luna already has experienced it once." Jason struggled to rein in his wolf and forced a breath to calm himself. After a moment, he said, "I will never allow Phoebe to feel an ounce of hurt again. Besides, it's already too late for that." Garrison raised a brow. Though Lobo bulked at showing his neck to any wolf, Jason pulled back the collar of his shirt to reveal the still fresh mark where his neck and shoulder met. The redness was beginning to fade, though it still remained tender to the touch. "I belong to her now," Jason said with no trace of irony in his voice. Garrison briefly met his gaze before bowing. It was the answer he hoped for. After meeting his Luna and speaking with her, he recognized a fellow wolf in suffering. He was immediately taken by her caring and gentle soul and could not understand how she was able to survive a rejection. It took strength Garrison didn't even know existed. "I want the names of your choices by the end of the week," Jason said. "Yes, sir." Garrison stood and gave a stiff bow before departing. After the door closed, Luke said, "That took balls to question you." "It did," Jason smirked. His desire to protect his Luna was greater than his fear of me. He just may be the perfect choice. Luke and Ben nodded. It seemed a bit much to assign Phoebe her own guard detail, but they understood why Jason was so insistent. He wasn't worried about threats from inside the pack. It was external threats that worried him. Blue Moon had no shortage of rivals, eager to take advantage of any misfortune they might suffer. With their marks still fresh, his overprotectiveness was in high drive. No one would begrudge him this much. Luke and Ben had been surprised to see the mark on his neck and insisted on another celebration. Now that Jason had settled on Phoebe's security, he felt more inclined to join them. "Here we are," Phoebe said as she carefully removed the trays from the oven. She set them on hot pads on the counter so that the pups could see their hard work. Many still had dusting of sugar and flour in their hair, despite cleaning up their faces while the brownies baked. They clapped excitedly. "Now while it cools, we'll make the frosting," Phoebe announced. Immediately they gathered around, helping to measure the sugar, milk, and butter. She heated the mix and had the pups take turns stirring while it heated to a boil. Taking it from the heat, she added the chocolate chips, stirring them until they melted. Once it was mixed, they placed it in the fridge for rapid cooling and started the next batch. They needed a pot for each tray of brownies they had made. While the frosting set, they cleaned up. By the time the brownies cooled, so had the frosting. With Nora on hand, they split the pups into smaller groups and armed them with spatulas to smooth the frosting over the trays. The pups giggled, licking their hands and spatulas, eager to taste the fruits for their labor. Around them, the cooks chuckled, happy to see the pups so excited with what many deemed a mundane task. Phoebe had started her lesson, introducing the pups to the kitchen staff. Some were surprised their Luna remembered their names, but knowing the members of her pack had always come easy to her. Then, she showed the pups the items they'd be using and the ingredients to make chocolate syrup brownies from scratch, as well as the chocolate chip frosting. It would be impossible for the pups to make enough brownies for the entire pack, so the cooks were already increasing the recipe and multiplying the batches. The trays Phoebe, Nora, and the pups made were reserved for their families. It was almost lunch, so they cut the brownies and divided them up accordingly, giving each pup one for themselves, as well as a small bag for them to take home to treat their parents. The extras Phoebe presented to the cooks as thanks for use of the kitchen. "Thank you," Phoebe smiled at the staff. She hated to think they had interrupted meal preparation, but the kitchen was quite large, and the staff assured her the use of one oven meant nothing. "Of course, Luna," Myra, the head of the kitchen, answered. She was a robust she-wolf, a mother who successfully raised 3 pups and her niece. Myra reminded Phoebe of the motherly wolf in charge of the kitchen at her old pack. "You can come by any time, and please bring the pups too." Phoebe hugged the older she-wolf, much to the latter's surprise, before herding the pups back to the dining hall. Parents were already arriving, having been told their pups would be at the kitchen rather than the daycare center. The pups greeted their parents, eager to show off their culinary results. "Mommy," Emma tugged Phoebe's hand, "can we show Daddy too?" "Of course," Phoebe smiled, patting her head. She was still getting used to the title both the siblings eagerly bestowed on her, but it warmed her heart. Though she was hesitant to disrupt Jason's work, she wanted the pups to feel closer to him. Nora nodded encouragement, so she left the former Luna to watch over the rest of the pups, still waiting for their parents, and took Blake and Emma by the hand. Both had been given baggies with extra brownies for Luke, Mona, Ben, and Lucille, as none of them had pups of their own. Considering how long both Ben and Luke had been mated, it seemed strange neither started families. Despite their enhanced libidos, werewolf pregnancies really weren't very common. She-wolves were only fertile during their heat cycle, which occurred once a year, usually during the winter months, thus ensuring their pup would be born in the spring, a holdover from when relied on the natural bounty of the earth. Less common were she-wolves who had their cycle in the spring, so that the pup would be born in the fall during the harvest season. Even with a wolf's insatiable appetite for their mate, that left a narrow window for pregnancies to occur. And since wolves only gave birth to one pup at a time, it actually gave them a rather low birth rate. Survival rate of pups was practically guaranteed, which aided consistent population growth overall. However, in Luke and Ben's case, she had a sneaking suspicion they deliberately held off having pups so as not to make Jason any more jealous of their good fortune. She hadn't asked them yet, but it made sense given how close they all were. Prior to being marked she-wolves had a truncated heat cycle that was both shorter and less intense than a marked female. If they mated during that time, it could still lead to pregnancy, though their fertility was really not that high. Now that Phoebe had been marked, her heat cycles would become much more intense, especially if they coincided with the full moon and pregnancy all but guaranteed. All wolves shared a strong connection to the full moon. They were stronger and felt more at peace under the light of a full moon, more so than any other time. According to Mani, the effect was even more potent with them, which was why Mani insisted Jason mark them before the Luna ceremony, which was set to take place on the upcoming full moon. Phoebe still recalled their conversation earlier that morning. Phoebe sensed Jason's departure, but remained in contented sleep. She felt heavy as the pack bond knitted her into it. The connection was stronger and more potent now. She had a direct connection to the ebb and flow of the pack's emotional state. It was a good thing it was so early and most were still asleep or just beginning to stir. Once they woke, it would strain her mind as their worries invaded her through the link. Over time, her mind would naturally learn to channel the input, but for now, she would have to be careful when she accessed the link. "How are you feeling?" Mani asked. "Good, considering. Why did you want him to mark us now?" "It was for his own good." "What do you mean?" "Our strength is directly tied to the moon. We are weakest during the new moon and strongest when it is full." "Isn't that true for all wolves?" "Yes, but even more so for us. We've been hiding our true strength all this time, so you've never truly experienced it. Our mate is strong, but he won't be able to endure it full force. That's why we marked him now." It was the last night of the new moon. As the moon waxes and our power grows, he can gradually acclimate to it. "You mean it will really affect him that much?" "Naturally. An alpha's strength always increases once he is marked and mated to his Luna. How much is determined by the Luna's inherent strength. It's best if he acclimates gradually." Jason's return had cut off further discussion as he slid back into bed and pulled her back into his arms. He nuzzled her as he adjusted her position so that as much of their bare skin touched as possible. Phoebe tried to pretend to be asleep, but she felt his stiff member pressing against her thigh as he held her close. His large hand gently caressed her, earning a moan of approval. Jason didn't seem aware of any changes brought on by the mark. In fact, he was more concerned for her and whether she felt any discomfort from the previous night. Perhaps it was the novelty of its newness, or Mani was correct after all. Jason was replying to an email when a knock at his door interrupted him. Luke and Ben still sat on the couch trying to convince him to join their celebration, but quickly put their glasses down at the door opened, revealing Phoebe and the pups. "Daddy?" Emma squealed, running up to Jason without hesitation. Jason scooped up the pup as he stood. He covered his awkwardness by nuzzling the pup, causing her to giggle as the bristles on his cheek tickled hers. No matter how many times a wolf shaved, they would have a 5 o'clock shadow a few hours later. Many usually gave up on a clean-shaved look and ended up with at least goatee if not a full beard, Jason included. Though their bond was still new, their scent was definitely becoming more potent. It wasn't quite the same as if they were truly from his blood, but it was more than enough to mark the pups as his and that they were under his protection if anyone intended them harm. In the back of his mind, Lobo wagged his tail, pleased with how the pups were accepting them. His wolf had always loved pups and longed for its own as much as it longed for its mate. "What brings my little treasures here?" Jason asked, kneeling and bringing the more nervous Blake into his embrace. He could tell Blake was as desperate for parents as his sister, but knowing Jason was an alpha made the pup too nervous to appear too familiar. Though Jason was still adjusting to his new role, he wanted both brother and sister to be comfortable with him. Blake leaned into him and snuggled close, enjoying his embrace. "We made brownies," Phoebe said as the pups showed off their baggies. The cooks are making enough for the pack, but the ones we made are for the pups' parents. Try one. They are really good, Emma said, opening her bag. This one is for you. Jason accepted the gooey offering, still slightly warm. He had never been one for sweets, but nonetheless savored the pup's treat. It was the first gift his pups ever gave him. It's good, right? Blake asked. Like the other pups, they had eaten their own immediately. It is. Jason hugged them close. Given his awkward childhood, Jason never felt particularly close to his father, so he wasn't prepared for this kind of situation, but he wanted it to last forever. Does that mean we won't get any? Ben asked. He couldn't keep the hurt from his voice as he loved chocolate. We have some for you, Uncle Ben, Blake said, carrying his baggie to them. And for Uncle Luke, too. Emma followed him to the couch and happily crawled into Luke's lap before offering him one of the gooey brownies. The pups had one for each of them and their mates. Eagerly accepting the treats, the Beta and Gamma popped them into their mouths, devouring them in a single bite. The Gamma moaned as he leaned back, practically comatose in his rapture. Blake and Emma giggled at his over-the-top reaction. Where can I buy these? Ben sighed. You can buy the ingredients at any grocery store, Phoebe chuckled as Jason slid his arms around her and held her close. We made these from scratch. You did? Ben looked at her in surprise. You bake? Sure. I find it relaxing, Phoebe nodded. Her mother loved to bake, and her father had about as big of a sweet tooth as the Gamma. You missed your calling. You definitely belong in the kitchen. What was that? Jason let out a short growl at the thought of Phoebe being anywhere or anything but his Luna. Easy, Alpha, Luke chuckled. That's just the chocolate talking. Speaking of, Ben leaned forward, but Blake stepped out of his reach, saving the last brownie. This is for Auntie Lucy, the pup declared. Ben huffed. Like Jason, Lucille didn't have a particularly strong sweet tooth, but she would never turn away fresh-baked goodies, especially if they were delivered by her niece and nephew. Phoebe chuckled. There are more in the kitchen. The cooks are making them for dessert. Oh, really? Ben perked up. Well, now you know the way to his heart, Jason joked, nuzzling her and kissing her temple. He didn't care how many hearts she captured, as long as hers belonged to him. Here's an updated budget for the Luna ceremony, Luke said as he handed him a folder. Jason sighed, opening it. Seriously? How much does my mother expect to spend on this? Luke chuckled, knowing Jason would sign off on it. No expense was too much for his Luna, even if she thought they were already spending too much. Nora was taking full advantage, and Lucille and Mona were helping. The pack had gone a long time without a proper Luna, so everyone wanted to pull out all the stops. The ceremony was still a week away, and preparations were humming along. The invitations had been sent to various packs, and almost all RSVP'd their intentions to join the pack for its long-awaited induction. Many had also included congratulations, knowing how long Jason searched for his mate. Jason was content to see his pack so enthusiastic, so he didn't mind the constantly changing budget. What was more, they were already feeling Phoebe's influence. The pack was much calmer. There were fewer arguments and almost zero fights. Harassment of the lower ranks, particularly Omega she-wolves, had always been low, but now it was non-existent. Mealtimes were boisterous, but everyone kept it to acceptable levels, even the unmated males. Not only was the pack calmer, but they were more focused. The warriors were more serious about their training, patrols of the border were more thorough, and rogues were handled more efficiently. In Jason's mind, even the meals had improved in flavor and scope, but he did miss Phoebe's home cooking. She had yet to make a private meal just for them, but he didn't want to disrupt her settling into the pack. Garrison dropped off his selections. Luke added, handing Jason another file. He took this one with intense interest. The warrior had written down 8 names. Luke included profiles on each of the wolves with a description of their strengths, experience, training, and achievements. He was pleased to note all were highly decorated warriors with ample experience. He included 8 names in case there were any you objected to, Luke said. Jason nodded. He originally intended it to be a 6-man team, but 8 warriors allowed for alternates, making the team more flexible when it came to traveling. Jason trusted Garrison to organize his team appropriately. Approved, Jason said. Tell Garrison he can pull his team and start training them. Luke nodded. He expected as much. Even after a week, Jason's protectiveness over Phoebe had not diminished. If anything, it had increased. What was more, Jason's alpha aura seemed to be becoming more potent. He exuded it without trying and commanded attention wherever he stepped into a room. Luke had known Jason's influence would grow once he found his Luna, but even he was surprised by just how much. The phone suddenly rang on the Beta's desk. He glanced at the caller ID before answering. "Elder, this is Beta Luke." Jason perked up at Luke's practiced greeting. "Of course. He is right here." Luke brought the phone to Jason. "Elder Ansel Alpha?" Jason grunted, taking the phone. "Elder Ansel." "Ah, Alpha Jason? I'm calling in regards to the balm you submitted to us for a patent. You have analyzed it, I trust. We have completed the first set of trails, but I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. Of course, when should we expect you?" "I have time in a few days, and I was planning to attend your pack's Luna ceremony." "We look forward to your visit," Jason agreed. The line disconnected, and Jason handed it back to Luke with a thoughtful look. Luke eyed the phone, then his alpha. "What do you think?" "You know how long wolves have searched for a means to heal silver wounds?" "Practically since we started roaming the earth," Luke nodded. "I figured they'd want to keep the information secure until it's confirmed," Jason said, "which is why he didn't want to talk about it over the phone." Jason nodded. He had absolute faith in Phoebe, so he was confident in the balm Bridget developed. The council didn't have the luxury of his confidence, so they would want to confirm everything concerned with the balm. His only worry was that the balm had originally been invented in another pack. As such, Rimrock could claim propriety. But Phoebe and Bridget had made it independently without using any of the pack's resources, and Jason hoped that would give his pack the edge. In any case, they wouldn't know the council's thoughts until the Elder arrived. Jason was prepared to defend Bridget's rights to her creation, regardless of whether Blue Moon was awarded the patent rights. He was already researching the next step. Every pack had their specialty that earned the majority of the pack's finances. Blue Moon specialized in security. Wolves, witches, and humans alike contacted them to provide security teams for important personages. Other packs specialized in medicine and medical treatments. Although it would mean less money for his pack if they partnered with another, they could be able to manufacture and distribute much more easily. Jason was willing to sacrifice some of his pack's potential profits if it meant more creatures who needed the balm would receive it. Ultimately, he would leave the final decision to Phoebe and Bridget to determine how they would market and distribute the balm. "Elder Ansel, welcome," Luke greeted as the aged wolf exited the armored SUV. Almost 70, Ansel looked closer to 55 as wolves aged more slowly once they reached their 20s. His once black hair was salt and peppered now, but his blue eyes were still clear and keen. He smiled amicably to the Beta. "There seems to be quite a lot of activity," Ansel noted, looking where the pack members were stringing lanterns and icicle lights. "The Luna ceremony is in 3 days," Luke smiled. "We're expecting the alphas we've invited to stare arriving later today." "Ah, yes," Ansel nodded, though he was already well aware, as he planned to stay to witness it himself. "We've prepared a room for you. Did you want to head there first?" "No, I think it would be best to see Alpha Jason first." "Of course, follow me." Luke expected as much and led the Elder up to the office while others carried his bags to the prepared room. Luke knocked on the door before opening it and announced their guest. Jason immediately stood coming around his desk to shake hands with the Elder, having already been informed of his arrival through the link. Ben was also in attendance. "Would you like a drink?" Jason asked, gesturing for Ansel to sit. "Yes, please, my usual." Ben nodded, retrieving brandy from the cabinet and poured for their guest. For Jason, he poured whiskey before joining Luke at the door to ensure they were not interrupted. Ansel sniffed the brandy, savoring it. It was human-made, so it wouldn't affect him, but the flavor was much better than a werewolf blend, as aconite added a bitter aftertaste. "Very fine," Ansel sighed. "First, I believe congratulations are in order. I know you've been looking for your mate for a long time." Jason nodded. "I have, but she was worth the wait." Ansel chuckled. Jason sounded like a wolf in love, and the devotion was certainly genuine. When Ansel originally received the invitation, he was worried knowing how long Jason waited for a mate and thought perhaps he had taken a chosen mate. A chosen mate was fine for other wolves, but for an alpha, especially one as powerful as Jason, it could have dire consequences. But it was clear to him Jason had found his true, fated mate. He was relieved. Blue Moon had suffered considerably with the disharmony of their previous Alpha and Luna. After taking over, Jason had instilled a sense of stability and the pack's bonds were largely repaired, but without a Luna, it was incomplete. A fated mate was always an Alpha's first choice, and in the past, they found them with relative ease. Now, however, it was becoming more difficult for higher-ranked wolves to find their fated mates, and the council was at a loss to explain why. Knowing how important mates were, the moon goddess generally ensured they would find each other. Mates were often found in neighboring packs, if not their own, but there were exceptions. It had taken Jason over a decade, and his mate had been found in a pack a considerable distance away. Ansel expected great things from Jason's Luna. "I look forward to meeting her," Ansel said, taking out a file as to the other business that brought me here. Jason accepted the thin folder and looked over the graphs illustrating the test results. As I explained over the phone, we completed the first round of tests and they were unbelievable. The healing rate of wounds was almost 3 times faster with the balm and scarring was dramatically lessened, Ansel said. Jason was surprised to see the numbers, but not by the result after Bridget and Phoebe explained it. He had full faith and trust in their balm's remarkable ability. "We wolves have been searching for millennia for a cure for silver, and we've never come as close as this. I must ask, how did you do it?" "I didn't," Jason shook his head. "The honor goes to someone else." He looked to his beta and gamma, giving them a nod. Ben bowed before departing. Ansel watched the silent exchange with a note of curiosity. He didn't sense them link, which meant this was pre-planned, or the gamma knew his alpha's intention without the need for instruction. They waited several minutes before a knock announced the gamma's return. With him arrived a pair of she-wolves. Jason stood immediately, claiming the polite, silver-eyed one kissing her temple. The gesture seemed familiar to them both. Even so, she blushed at his attention. "Elder Ansel," Jason finally turned to his guest, "I'd like to introduce my mate and Luna, Phoebe, as well as our new pack member, Bridget." "Luna, hello," Ansel hurriedly stood bowing to the dark-haired beauty. "Phoebe, this is Elder Ansel from the council," Jason explained. "Hello," she sweetly smiled. "Please sit." Bridget sat on a chair while Jason pulled Phoebe into his lap, refusing to allow her to sit anywhere else. Ansel watched as unobtrusively as he could, noting the Alpha and Luna's body language, and was satisfied, though it was still unclear as to why the moon goddess made it so difficult for them to find each other. There had to be a reason behind it. "Elder Ansel and I were discussing the silver healing balm," Jason explained, looking from Phoebe to Bridget. "He has some questions about it, so I thought it best he spoke with the inventors." "Oh," Bridget nodded. "I'll explain all I can." "You invented it?" Ansel couldn't hide his surprise as he turned his attention to the other she-wolf. "Yes, with Phoebe's help," Bridget answered. "In our former pack, our Luna coated her claws in silver, and she wasn't shy about using them. We came up with the balm to help our fellow pack members heal from her punishments." "Your former pack," Ansel glanced from one she-wolf to the other. "Then you both came from the same pack." "Yes, Rimrock," Phoebe confirmed. "We were both unranked." Ansel nodded. The majority of wolves in any pack were unranked individuals that included any wolf lower than Delta, but higher than Omega. "So what did you do in your pack?" Ansel asked. "I mean your former pack." "I was a nurse." "I was a teacher of sorts." "Teacher?" Phoebe nodded. "I watched over the pack's pups and taught them lessons." It was always a bit awkward describing her position in her former pack. Rimrock didn't have a dedicated daycare facility like Blue Moon, and it wasn't like the pack paid her much for the time she spent with the pups, nor compensated her for the money she spent buying supplies for their various projects. Ansel was silent as he processed this information. It was rare for a Luna to be chosen out of the lower ranks because an Alpha's strength could easily overwhelm lower-ranked wolves. His Luna needed the mental fortitude to withstand not just his aura, but also the pack's dependence on her. Yet there was something different about this she-wolf, something almost uncanny. She didn't seem to be suffering at all, despite the aura that seemed to be oozing from Jason. Jason always had a strong presence. His aura easily filled a room, but now it was even more potent. Ansel sensed it when he first entered, but it was even more apparent now that Phoebe was in the room. His aura swirled around her like a protective blanket. A wolf would be a fool to challenge him, or worse, threaten her. So this balm was actually invented in another pack, Ansel said. Why didn't Rimrock file for a patent? Probably because they didn't know about it, Bridget said. We only used it on the unranked and Omega wolves who suffered the most. No one else was interested in something two she-wolves cooked up in their kitchen. Cooked up in your kitchen? Mine, Phoebe said. My backyard was full of healing herbs too, so it was a convenient workspace for us to experiment. So then you didn't use any of your former pack's facilities? Phoebe and Bridget shook their heads. Bridget had asked for permission to use the hospital's lab, but was denied. No one was interested in what the she-wolf intended to make. Ansel considered this news carefully before coming to a decision. In that case, I see no reason not to award Blue Moon a full patent for the balm, and both of you will be created with its creation. Phoebe shared a smile with Bridget. She honestly couldn't care less if her name was associated with the balm. Bridget was the one who spent hours researching and experimenting to create it. So what happens now? Phoebe asked. Now that we own the patent, we can make and distribute it any way we see fit, Jason answered. Or we can sell it to another pack to do the same. If we choose to collaborate with another pack, it will decrease our profits somewhat, but if we partner with a pack that specializes in medicine, they'd have facilities to mass produce and distribute it with ease. Meaning more wolves would have access to it, Phoebe said, looking at Bridget. I don't mind less profits for myself, Bridget said. I think it's worth it if it means increasing availability, but this is also the pack's finances, so... I agree, Phoebe seconded. Smaller profits is worth the cost if it means increasing distribution. Jason chuckled. I had a feeling both of you would say that. That's why I've already started looking into potential partners. Really? Phoebe looked at him. Yeah, Harvest Moon in Kansas is probably the best candidate, though they are sometimes difficult to work with. Once they see what your balm can do, I think they'll be more than happy to work with us. Ansel nodded. A good choice. They are leaders in medical techniques and medicine. They'll be able to distribute the balm not just to wolves, but other creatures as well, fairies, even humans. Why humans? Bridget asked curiously. Our testers indicated that their skin felt much softer after using the balm. There could be a secondary market in beauty products geared toward humans, besides the medicinal benefits for supernatural creatures, minus vampires. Why not vampires? Jason asked. The history of werewolves and vampires was punctuated with several large wars, and a certain level of animosity still existed between them, though they were generally peaceful. Vervain, Bridget answered. What? Jason raised an eyebrow. Vervain is as deadly to vampires as wolfsbane is to us, Phoebe explained. Since it's an ingredient in the balm, it would be dangerous for them to use, Bridget agreed. That isn't to say we couldn't come up with a formula that will work for them, but it would take a lot of trial and error to find a substitute for vervain. Interesting, Jason said. Harvest Moon has top-of-the-line facilities, so I'm sure they could help with that, Ansel said, if you do end up partnering with them. Agreed. Their alpha is coming to the Luna ceremony, Jason said. We can discuss it with him when he arrives. Which reminds me, Luke. The beta stepped forward, presenting each of them with a personalized pack card. As Nora assured her, Phoebe's was a black card with unlimited spending. Bridget was surprised to be given a gold card. Is this right? Jason nodded. But I'm just a nurse. Who invented a life-saving medicine? Jason said. As its creator, you'll receive royalties for each sale in addition to your usual pack salary. Believe me when I say it will be quite a sum. Bridget nodded, still not quite believing it. Not in her wildest dreams did she think their little kitchen project would lead to this. All she wanted to do was help her fellow wolves. She didn't need fame, but it seemed it was finding her anyway. Bridget looked at Phoebe, but the latter was staring at her new spending card with a frown. It was just too much. Phoebe was happy to see her friend receiving much-deserved recognition, but she hadn't done anything remotely as important. She certainly didn't deserve a card with no limit. "Phoebe," Jason softly intoned. She looked up to see his eyes swirling amber with his desire and devotion. It wrapped around her like a protective blanket, assuring her he would always be at her side. After her rejection, Phoebe thought she would never know this level of care and security, but Jason made it known time and time again his world revolved around her. Smiling, she stroked his cheek, earning a low, possessive growl that almost sounded like a purr. He smiled, kissing her fingers. Though he was keeping his advances chaste in front of their company, his gaze promised much more. "Beta Luke." "Alpha William." Luke nodded, greeting to the Alpha of Winter Moon. They were close allies, so he was a familiar sight. William was rather short for an alpha, barely clearing 5'7", while most alphas easily reached over 6 feet. This did not mean William was a pushover, the exact opposite in fact. His complex about his height made the alpha even more serious about his training. Even when they took their matches seriously, Jason only managed to stay on an even keel with the other. "You remember Camila," William said as he assisted the she-wolf out of the vehicle. Luke nodded, trying to keep back a grimace. He was no stranger to the female who had been William's companion for several years. She boasted a voluptuous form with large breasts that appealed to a lot of wolves. In heels, she was several inches taller than William, though in actuality Luke believed them to be the same height. Luke was not fond of her as she was cut from the same mold as Katrina. Both were lazy despite coming from upper ranks, and both were looking for alpha mates, not caring what the moon goddess intended. Luke now knew Katrina rejected her rightful mate in her pursuit of Jason, and he wondered if Camila had done the same. He certainly wouldn't put it past her. In all the time he knew her, she never seemed concerned with finding her fated mate. There was a time Camila even showed interest in Jason, though she didn't have the guts to challenge Katrina. "Your usual room has been prepared," Luke said. "Dinner is still several hours away, so please feel free to relax." "Ah, yes?" William hesitated. "Tell me, is it true? Did Jason finally find his mate?" "He did," Luke smiled. "I was there to witness it myself. Then Blue Moon finally has a proper Luna, eh?" "It does indeed, and I've never felt the pack bond stronger." "I can't wait to meet her," William nodded and made his way inside. Like most, he knew how long Jason had searched and waited, forgoing all relationships in the meantime. Tonight was certain to be one of many surprises. Luke was certain the entire weekend would be full of surprises for their guests. The Luna ceremony wasn't for another 2 days, but Jason was using it as an excuse for an alpha meeting as well, since so many were gathering. Tonight was only a mixer of sorts for them to greet each other in an informal setting, as well as introduce Phoebe and the pups. Tomorrow, the alphas would meet formally, and Jason hoped to unveil the new healing balm as long as the Harvest Moon Alpha made his appearance. The third day would culminate in the Luna ceremony and a moonlit run led by the new Alpha and Luna. Jason said Phoebe's wolf was speaking to her, and he was certain she would be able to shift. That, in and of itself, was something to celebrate, considering what they now knew about her past. They worried she might have difficulties during her shift, but the few times Jason broached the conversation, Phoebe gave no hint of it being an issue. What worried her was remembering the names of all the alphas, lunas, and betas invited to the event. It was a worry Jason found laughable, since she had no difficulty recalling any pack member she was introduced to, even if it was only a quick hello. Luke turned as the next vehicle arrived, noting its occupants and greeting them. As he ushered them inside and a pack member parked their car, he linked Jason. "No sign of Harvest Moon yet." "Let me know as soon as they arrive." Jason closed the link. He leaned back in his chair. With the council's tactful approval, he was eager to begin negotiations. He had only met the Harvest Moon Alpha once or twice before. From what he recalled, the Alpha was a tall, lanky wolf, but quick and suitably stubborn. His Luna was more amicable and cooperative, so he hoped she could convince her mate to work with them. "There, you are," Lucille said, entering without knocking. "You do realize there is a party going on? Not for a few more hours. Well, you have to get ready too, you know. It doesn't look good if you are late to your own party." "It doesn't take that long." Lucille snorted. Right. I forgot males are so easy. Fine, well, head up whenever. Mom and I are getting Phoebe and the kids ready in her suite so you'll have yours all to yourself. Why in Mother's suite? So you can't sneak a peek at your precious Luna until the party. Lucille smirked. If we let the two of you get ready together, you'll never make an appearance. Jason frowned. I mean, I know mates are all over each other, but you two have been like rabbits. Jason felt his face warm. Don't worry, we'll take care of her. Just don't get so caught up in work you forget to join us. Jason grunted as his sister departed. She had a point. Every time he saw Phoebe, he could barely contain himself. Even now, the thought was enough to stir him. Jason growled at himself and sighed. Somehow, he had to marshal his control tonight, at least until they returned to their bedroom. Lobo was already wagging his tail in anticipation. Jason tried to shake the thoughts away and focused on work. Time passed more quickly than he realized. When he looked at the clock, he had less than an hour to get ready. Cursing himself, he closed his laptop and hurried to his room, jumping in the shower. When he emerged and stepped into the closet, he had a moment of panic, not knowing what Phoebe was wearing. He didn't want to clash nor appear too formal. Finally, he settled on his customary black silk shirt and trousers before heading down. Where are you, brother? Work ran late. I'm on my way down now. Lucille gave Phoebe a sympathetic smile. I swear he doesn't know the first thing about moderation. Phoebe chuckled. Jason seemed incapable of balancing work and play. Though running late on such an important night didn't seem to surprise everyone else who considered him a workaholic, she couldn't help but feel it was her fault in some way. Well, yes and no, Mani said. You two have been going at it pretty steadily. What do you mean? I assumed it was because our bond was new. Well, yes, but we're also approaching the full moon. So? I already told you. Phoebe caught Mani's meaning. Even if she wasn't in heat, Jason would still be affected by the full moon and desire her even more strongly. That would mean he would also become more protective since he wouldn't want another male near her during those times. Bingo, now you get it. Does this mean he'll calm down after the full moon? Possessive-wise? Probably. But he likes making us call his name, so probably not in bed, so don't worry. Phoebe fought her blush. That wasn't what she was worried about. Sure. Something the matter? Lucille asked. Phoebe shook her head. Just a disagreement with my wolf. Lucille nodded. Just because their wolf spirits were part of them didn't mean they always agreed. After hearing about Phoebe's situation from her brother, any interaction Phoebe had with her wolf was an important achievement. What do you think you are doing? Phoebe jerked to attention at the harsh voice and saw a she-wolf towering over her pups. Since arriving at Blue Moon, Blake and Emma had enjoyed an easy, carefree life. No pack member would think about threatening them. Do you know how expensive this dress is? We didn't mean to bump into you, Blake said, picking up his sister who had fallen during the collision. We were just playing. Playing? I'll show you play. That won't be necessary, Phoebe said, barely keeping the growl out of her voice as she quickly approached. Mommy. Emma ran up to her, hugging her leg. These are your spawn? The she-wolf demanded as Blake joined his sister under their adoptive mother's protection. They are my pups, yes, Phoebe corrected, warily eyeing her. She was several inches taller, though. That meant little to Phoebe, used to facing wolves taller than herself. The she-wolf had a voluptuous figure with breasts and hips that would turn just about any male's head, especially when crammed into her short red dress. Her auburn hair was silky smooth and framed a narrow but pleasing face. She would have been beautiful if not for her scowl. They ran into me and nearly knocked me over. What if I bruise? I think you will survive, Phoebe answered evenly, much to the she-wolf's shock. Phoebe had always been the first to back down whenever conflict arose because of her low rank, much to Mani's consternation. Now that she was Luna, it was becoming easier to stand up against unreasonable wolves. She might have a gentle nature, but she certainly wouldn't tolerate anyone threatening her pups. Kids, say you're sorry for bumping into this lady. We're sorry. We'll be more careful, they said in unison. Apology not accepted. Well, that really isn't our problem, is it? Phoebe said, shooing the pair towards Lucille. Go back to your aunt and uncle, you two. Hang on, the she-wolf demanded. That's it. You're not going to punish them?" Phoebe calmly looked at her. "Apologizing to you was punishment enough. Why you?" "Daddy," Blake and Emma suddenly squealed. The room fell silent as Jason entered. Before he could apologize for his tardiness, two small forms ran up to him with their arms open wide. Chuckling, he scooped up the pair of pups and nuzzled each in turn. After a week of awkwardness, Jason now had a comfortable familiarity with the pups. His scent was firmly established with theirs, and since they spent the majority of their day with Phoebe, her scent was also strongly entwined with theirs, and the combination was rather addictive. "Daddy, you're late," Emma loudly declared. "I know. I'm sorry about that. It won't happen again," Jason said, earning a few chuckles around the room from his packmates. No doubt it was quite amusing to see one of the most powerful alphas being chastised by a little pup. "You better not, or you'll be in trouble," Emma warned, earning another round of laughter. "Right, Mommy?" Jason looked to see Phoebe approaching and nearly dropped the siblings. Her hair had been crimped to give it more body and partially tamed in a half-up do. She wore a classic little black dress showing off her shapely legs. The neckline was square with wide shoulder straps and dipped just low enough to tease him with the swell of her breasts. All of her shapely curves were on display, and he cursed himself for not asking ahead of time so he could mentally prepare to see her looking so sultry. No doubt that was Lucille's intention. It was going to be a long night. "You're late," Phoebe said as he carefully set the pups down before pulling her close. "I know, I'm sorry." He kissed her temple, savoring her scent, with a pleased growl. His mate, his Luna. "Careful, Alpha," Phoebe whispered, smelling his arousal, "or your punishment will be to sleep alone tonight." The warning practically made Lobo curl up on his back, begging for a second chance, while Jason marshaled his control, saying, "That's not fair, Angel." "No, what's not fair is that I'll be punished too if it comes to that," Phoebe corrected. "Do you want me to suffer for a crime I didn't commit?" Jason chuckled. "Message received. I'll be on my best behavior. I'll believe it when I see it." Jason cleared his throat, realizing they had an audience. Turning to face them with his arms around her waist, he said, "Friends, thank you for coming all this way. These days it seems we're always gathering to face some sort of crisis, so I'm sure you'll all agree how nice it is to be together for a joyous event instead." The alphas, lunas, betas, and gammas from various packs gathered nodded in agreement. Lately it had been rogue attacks. A year ago it had been hunters, and before that vampires. They always seemed to be facing one crisis after another, so it was good to gather for a celebration. A pack member carrying a tray of drinks approached, allowing Jason and Phoebe to each grab a wine glass. "As most of you know, I've been looking for my fated mate for some time," Jason said. "I can't tell you how glad I am to finally be able to introduce her to you. Everyone, this is my mate and Luna, Phoebe, and our pups, Blake and Emma. I'm sure you're all eager to meet them as I was, so let's toast the most beautiful she-wolf I have ever met, though I have been told I'm biased." The crowd chuckled as they raised their glasses and toasted the new couple. Though some had doubted the announcement given how long Jason had been waiting, there was no denying the body language between them. At long last he had found his mate, and Blue Moon finally had a proper Luna. None would be able to ignore the pack's influence now that it was complete. "I must say, this is a surprise." Jason grinned wide and eagerly shook the approaching Alpha's hand. "It's been a while, Will. Phoebe, this is Alpha William of the Winter Moon Pack. Will, my angel, Phoebe." "Pleasure to meet you," Phoebe smiled, sensing a long friendship between the two alphas. "The pleasure is all mine. And this is Camila," William said as he snaked an arm around a curvy she-wolf Phoebe could hardly forget. "Ah, yes, we've already met," Phoebe nodded, daring the she-wolf to elaborate. No one had been more surprised by Jason's arrival or announcement than Camila. When William showed her the invitation, she assumed Katrina had finally managed to snag her alpha. But now she found herself facing a very different she-wolf. Phoebe was petite and, though pretty enough, certainly didn't have many major assets. And yet, Camila couldn't put her finger on it, but there was something unnerving about the female that had her own wolf cowering and ready to expose its belly. "I am curious, though," William continued. "Pups, you two only just met, right?" Phoebe smiled. Blake and Emma are adopted. They were orphans in my former pack. I took them in. Naturally, they came with Phoebe when she joined Blue Moon, Jason nodded. I adopted them officially during their pack initiation. Initiation? You mean blood initiation, William said, to which Jason confirmed. Still? It's kind of rude to expect a male to raise someone else's pups, isn't it? Camila said, especially an alpha. Depends on the male, I suppose, Phoebe eyed her coolly, though I think any male willing to display their paternal side is extremely attractive. What's precious to Phoebe is precious to me, Jason added as he glared at the she-wolf who spoke out of turn. Besides, I never heard of an alpha denying their Luna anything her heart desired. Jason's embrace around her waist tightened, pulling Phoebe against his chest as Lobo growled agreement. Nothing their mate requested would be denied. So why did your first mate reject you? Was it the kids or the fact you are wolfless? Camila asked. Since arriving, she had been making rounds throughout the room and gained quite a bit of gossip. Jason growled. William shot her a panicked look, pleading for her to watch her step. Phoebe only smiled as her eyes shimmered silver. She didn't bother to hide her amusement at Camilla's attempt to insult her. The rumors meant nothing to her. She made no attempt to hide her past rejection and felt no shame. As for the rumors of her being wolfless, anyone in tune with their wolf would know it was false, as Jason already proved. For the rest, they would realize the truth soon enough when they led the moonlit run. Neither, as far as I know, Phoebe answered calmly. My first mate had already settled on taking a chosen mate. Apparently, he was more interested in listening to his duck than his wolf. Jason's chest rumbled agreement as he kissed the top of her head and breathed deep. Phoebe knew he was angry, but it wouldn't do to cause a scene here. Hopefully her scent would keep him calm. The pups weren't even born then, and as for the other part, that will be cleared up on its own. Why not clear it up now? Camila smirked. Scared? Is that a challenge? Phoebe benignly smiled, her gray eyes shimmering again. Camila hesitated, her wolf cowering. The rumors swirling around the new Luna in front of her were enough to make most lower their head in shame, so Phoebe's confidence was unnerving. Her rejection was no secret, apparently, and as far as her being wolfless, Camila had only confirmed that no one had seen her wolf. Camila forced her doubts back. She couldn't afford to be intimidated. Not now. Forcing some bravado, she said, I, for one, wouldn't wait for a fated mate when there are better options standing right next to you. William sighed, not meeting Jason's pensive frown. He had been seeking his fated mate almost as long as Jason. While the latter had foregone any relationships wanting to be faithful to the mate he had yet to meet, William was no stranger to sharing his bed. Camila was by far his most consistent companion, and she had been pressing him to take each other as chosen mates. She was so convincing and earnest he had almost complied numerous times. I find it sad. Phoebe's gaze reflected her sorrow and pity. Searching for your fated mate certainly may seem arduous, but you should never forget they are searching for you too. Perhaps they have been looking even longer. Perhaps their first mate ripped their soul apart with a rejection, and they have hidden themselves from the pain, still desperately craving someone to make them whole. But to think you would give up the search and them, breaking the link that binds you together before either can even feel it, and abandon them to their pain when you could have been the one to save them. Jason has made me feel more complete than I ever thought was possible. He may call me Angel, but he is truly my guardian angel. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't found me when he did. Jason's embrace tightened. He bowed his head, nuzzling her as both he and Lobo were overcome with love for their mate. Jason would never stop telling her how special she was or making her feel loved. Our mate loves us. Lobo practically howled. I love you, Angel. Jason poured all his devotion into their link. Mommy! Mommy! Emma said, skipping up to them and grasping her hand. Blake and me found something. Wanna see? Of course, Phoebe smiled. Let's see what you found. She gave Jason a loving look before she let the pup pull her away. He was reluctant to let her go, but they would have plenty of time together later. Phoebe was glad to get away from the other she-wolf, who was far too irritating. She worried that William would make a very poor decision if he took the other as his chosen mate. But Phoebe wasn't sure it was her place to speak to him. He was Jason's friend, not hers, and they had only just met. "See, Mommy. Look," Emma said as they reached a rather quiet corner and pulled her mind away from her dark thoughts. There, several pups had gathered to avoid getting underfoot of so many alphas and lunas. Though it was unlikely any would reprimand the pups too harshly, while on Blue Moon's packlands, the presence of so many dominant figures made the pups inclined to be on their best behavior. Only Blake and Emma retained a boisterous nature due to Jason's alpha blood intermixed with theirs. The pups had gathered around an old, scuffed, upright piano. The front panels had been carved with a woodland scene with wolves showing that at one time the piano had been a centerpiece, though it was now regulated to this corner. "Well, look at that." Phoebe gently pulled out the bench and sat down. She noted the dust before lifting the protective cover over the keys. "How long has this been here?" The pups gathered around her shrugged. They had never heard it played in their lifetimes. "That's a shame." Phoebe tapped a few keys to find it still in tune. "You know, instruments need to be played or else they slowly die, but this one still has some life in it." "Play something, Mommy," Emma said, "please." "What would you like me to play?" "Something bouncy," Emma declared. "So we can dance." "You want to dance? Something bouncy? Oh, I know." Phoebe placed her hands on the keys. "So your mate," William cleared his throat. "She's something else. You have no idea." Jason smiled, his gaze slowly leaving her retreating form. "I can't count the number of ways she's surprised me." "She doesn't seem all that special," Camila scoffed, earning a warning glare from Jason she ignored. "I mean, she was already rejected once." William nudged her, trying to link her to be quiet, but she seemed oblivious. Now that Phoebe had walked away, the influence she had also waned, and Camila was eager to shed the last of her internal shame. Who in their right minds would give her the time of day? Jason struggled to control himself as Lobo raged, his eyes shifted and his hair bristled. Was this she-wolf really so oblivious? Did she have a death wish? Before he could answer, the sounds of someone plucking piano keys reverberated through the room. It was followed by someone running their hands down the line of keys before hitting the strong beat of Elton John's "I'm Still Standing." The stunned crowd turned as one toward the long-forgotten piano in the corner. There they saw Phoebe expertly playing the rousing 80s hit, while the young pups happily danced around her, hopping to the beat. Even the teenagers who hovered around the outskirts gathered close and grooved to the song none had heard before. Phoebe hardly seemed aware of the gathered crowd, laughing lightly at the pups' antics as her head swayed with the energetic song. Many looked to Jason for explanation, only to see him staring in wonder and pride. Dimly, he recalled the piano in her cottage and her confession that her mother had taught her to play. He had forgotten, but even with that knowledge, he hadn't expected her to play like this. "Did you know?" Luke nudged Jason, bringing him out of his silent reverie. "I knew her mother taught her to play," Jason said, but he had no idea she played this well. Phoebe ended the song with a flourish and laughed as the pups applauded and giggled, their faces flush from exertion. The gathered alphas and lunas suddenly broke into their own applause, startling her. Phoebe blushed, averting her gaze. She had never played for such a large group before, or any group, as she only played at home. "That was great," Ben declared as he and Lucille moved closer. "Can you play Never Gonna Give You Up?" "Really?" Lucille scoffed. "Why am I not surprised?" Phoebe chuckled at the gamma. "I thought you'd be an 80s fan, just like my dad." Lucille gave her mate an exasperated look even as Phoebe turned back to the piano. Placing her fingers on the keys, Phoebe began to play the opening chords to Atlee's Never Gonna Give You Up to the crowd's surprise and delight. Ben's expression lit up, recognizing the familiar tune, and much to Lucille's horror began to sing a voice horribly off-key. "We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you." Jason pinched the bridge of his nose, cringing in embarrassment. Luke chuckled, shaking his head. Both wished they could say the Gamma had been drinking, but he was definitely stone-cold sober. The rest of the room tried to hold in their laughter even as Lucille flushed red because of her mate's antics. As Ben finished the chorus, a new voice picked up the song for the second verse. Mouths dropped as Phoebe sang in a clear, strong voice that even made Ben sound better when he joined her for the chorus. "We've known each other for so long, your heart's been aching, but you're too shy to say it. Inside, we both know what's been going on. We know the game, and we're going to play it. And if you ask me how I'm feeling, don't tell me you're too blind to see. Never going to give you up. Never going to let you down. Never going to run around and desert you. Never going to make you cry. Never going to say goodbye. Never going to tell a lie and hurt you." Lobo was practically rolling in ecstasy at the sound of their mate's voice. Jason was finding it hard to contain himself as Phoebe and Ben finished their impromptu duet and earned stunned applause from their listeners. No one in the room had expected such a powerful voice from such a petite body. Lunas were the glue that bound a pack together. Thus, many alphas focused on finding a strong Luna, but there was more than one kind of strength, and many forgot that a Luna's character and heart were just as important, if not more so. Phoebe was proving just how important those factors really were to winning hearts and minds. "Am I supposed to be impressed?" Camila scoffed, earning several disgruntled glares and more than a few growls. "Perhaps you would prefer the classics," Phoebe amicably said, glancing at the other female. She turned back to the piano, playing Beethoven's Für Elise with ease. The gathered alphas and lunas looked on with approval. Like humans, werewolves appreciated skill, and their sensitive ears could pick out even the slightest nuances, which made it difficult to please them unless the player was truly a master of their craft. "Luna, how did you learn to play like that?" But a pup eagerly asked. "My mother taught me," Phoebe smiled. "It's easy, but you have to practice a lot. Right, Blake? Come here and play with me." Phoebe stopped playing to encourage the nervous pup to join her. Hesitating, he climbed onto the bench. Blake fidgeted as Phoebe placed a hand on the keys and played a simple melody. Still nervous, Blake nevertheless set a finger on the higher keys and played with her. Phoebe maintained a slow pace, making it easier for him to keep up, as it had been some time since they last played Heart and Soul. They ended together, and Phoebe hugged him as the pups cheered. "Can you play too, Emma?" a pup asked. "I can play Twinkle Twinkle," Emma proudly declared. She wasn't quite as studious as her brother, but with a new batch of admirers, Phoebe wondered if she would take it more seriously. Phoebe changed places with Emma so she could sit on the bench and tap out the familiar rhythm. The younger pups watched closely, eager to learn. Phoebe chuckled. Perhaps she had just gained a new group of music students. "I have lesson books, if any of you are interested in learning," Phoebe said. "We can turn the room next to the daycare into a music room for all of you." "Yeah!" The pups cheered, not only eager to learn, but eager to spend time with their kind Luna who never talked down to them. "But first we should give this piano some attention," Phoebe said. "You mean clean it?" A pup wrinkled his nose. "I do. It should be cleaned, polished, and tuned. It's important to take care of things that are special. It makes them stronger and better." "Sounds like work," another pup said. Phoebe laughed. "Well, of course it is. Anything worth having is worth working for. But work is easier when we do it together. Promise." "I can't believe her." Camila paced the hall. "Things worth having are worth working for. What is she, a Disney movie?" What made it worse was the effect Phoebe was having on the gathering. Everyone gravitated toward her as if she was an important wolf. Ha! She was wolfless. Did they not know that? Phoebe was nothing, a nobody. Even her first mate recognized that fact. What was her secret? Camila paused, glancing at her own assets on display in her tight dress. She was clearly more impressive than Phoebe, who was practically flat by comparison. And yet, Phoebe stood in the arms of the most influential alpha in the world. Jason seemed completely smitten. The look on his face when she played the piano was one of pure rapture. All night long he barely let her out of his arms, always holding her close and often bowing his head to nuzzle and kiss her as if he couldn't control the compulsion. Worse than Jason's apparent infatuation was the effect it was having on William. Prior to coming to Blue Moon, Camila had all but convinced him to take her as his chosen mate. With the romance of the Luna ceremony, she thought she would finally succeed, but Phoebe's speech and the way Jason acted ruined her plans. Even now, William turned down her advances, claiming he had a headache and just wanted to lie down. Her body craved release, and he was not delivering. Camila continued to pace. She had never been so frustrated. It wasn't easy turning an alpha's head. William's complex about his height made him an easy target, but his hope of finding his fated mate hampered her plans, and his friendship with Jason also greatly influenced him. William's desire for his fated mate mimicked Jason's obsession and made it even more difficult for her. Camila sighed. Jason would have made a far better mate. The only reason she hadn't tried for him was because of Katrina. Who would have thought that such a petite, unassuming female would unseat Katrina and take her place? If Camila had known it would be so easy to usurp the alpha daughter, she would have challenged Katrina herself. Jason was everything an alpha should be, strong, handsome, and tall. Camila could only imagine what it would be like to be held down by such a powerful alpha while he took her. She shivered in anticipation, her core heating up with just the thought. If that gray-eyed nobody could do it, then so could she. Coming to a decision, Camila stalked off down the hall. Making her way to a quiet staircase, she headed upward, eventually reaching the alpha floor. There she paused cautiously, listening for patrols. Blue Moon prided itself on its security, so there were always a few warriors wandering the halls. However, the alpha floor remained silent. Given the fact the alpha, beta, and gamma all lived on the upper floor, its security was virtually guaranteed. Added to that, the fact that the entire pack respected their alpha's boundaries, none would dare enter his domain without permission. This left a blind spot any wolf without a sense of self-preservation could take advantage of. Camila slowly stepped out into the hallway and moved further into the heart of the pack. Her nose wrinkled in disgust as she smelled Lucille, whom she never liked, as well as Luna Nora, who never liked her. She also caught the smell of pups and almost snarled. It was ridiculous to think those orphans enjoyed the privilege of living on the alpha floor. They should be hidden away somewhere with the omegas. Orphans were only useful as servants. With a huff, Camila wandered further in. She had never been on this floor, but all pack houses shared similar floor plans. The alpha's private suite would be in the heart of the floor. That's where she headed, reaching the final door past the common rooms. There she paused, breathing deep and smelling the unmistakable musk of a male in rut. It seemed he was just as eager for release as she was. Smiling, Camila pulled down her dress, letting it pool at her feet, leaving her completely nude as she hadn't bothered with undergarments. Once he saw her, she knew he'd never look at that plain nobody again. Finding the door unlocked, she boldly stepped inside and strode into the suite, past the sitting area, heading toward the bed before coming to a stop. It was empty. Camila frowned. The scent in the room was far too strong for its occupant to have been gone long. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened and Phoebe exited wrapped in a towel. She laughed as Jason emerged a step behind. His arm snagged around her waist, and he pulled her back to him, growling as he buried his nose in her neck, nibbling on her marking spot. Phoebe's back arched as she pressed against him. They had only just finished in the shower, and he already wanted more. She chuckled as her gaze suddenly fell on Camila, and stiffened in surprise. "What is it?" Jason mumbled against her neck, feeling her tense and the smell of her arousal fading. When she didn't answer, he finally looked up as a foreign smell invaded his nostrils. His gaze fell on Camila, and his eyes suddenly shifted to amber, practically glowing as a snarl ripped out of him. Rushing past Phoebe, he stalked toward the intruding she-wolf who dared interrupt his time with his mate in their private sanctum. Even as his hand gripped her throat, her wildest fantasies flitted through her mind. With a growl, Jason squeezed, cutting off her breath. Camilla's eyes went wide as she struggled for breath, clawing at his hand, but Jason's grip was a vice. His claws sunk into her flesh, causing pain to shoot through her as he dragged her back through the floor and tossed her down the first set of stairs. She rolled with a shriek, crumpling at the bottom. She gasped for breath. Tears streaked down her cheeks as pain coursed through her. Hesitantly, she looked up to see him standing over her fur, bristling as he fought his wolf for control. It was clear if his wolf won, she would be ripped to shreds in moments. But why? Alpha? She looked over her shoulder as a warrior arrived, summoned by Phoebe's mind link. It was clear he hadn't been informed the full extent of the situation, given the way he stared at the naked she-wolf at Jason's feet. "Get this thing out of my sight," Jason growled, "and find out how she got into my suite without being stopped." "Yes, Alpha?" The pack warrior seized Camilla's arm and dragged her away. She struggled, casting a pleading look toward Jason, but he had already turned away. His arms were wrapped around Phoebe, who had hurriedly put on a robe before following them. He breathed deep, taking in her scent to calm himself. "Angel, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Phoebe assured him, leaning into his chest. She had been surprised when she realized they weren't alone, but she hadn't been hurt. Jason groaned, trailing kisses down her neck, reaching her mark. Phoebe shivered as tingles shot through her like an electrical current. With a growl, he swept her off her feet and carried her bridal style to their bedroom, kicking the door closed. He set her down on her feet as they reached the bed. Phoebe sighed as he nibbled her ear. She shivered and chuckled, but didn't dare move, afraid her body would not respond. "Did I hurt you?" Jason gently pulled her to face him. "No," she smiled. "But next time, maybe warn me." Jason chuckled, kissing her, savoring her soft lips. Before meeting Phoebe, Jason used to roll his eyes whenever Lucille and Ben hunkered themselves into a convenient corner and spent hours kissing and touching each other. But now he understood. When Phoebe was close, he couldn't keep his hands from reaching for her. When she wasn't nearby, he longed for her and often had to fight himself not to go searching for her. If it wasn't for Luke's nagging, he wouldn't get any work done. Her scent was intoxicating and he couldn't get enough. The spicy note to her scent flared, confirming her desire for him, and his chest rumbled with a low growl. "Sorry, Angel," he muttered. He had never wanted to take her like that, like a crazed animal, but there was no denying how satisfying it had been. There was something about claiming her with no semblance of self-control that stirred him and his wolf. Was it? She pulled him close, kissing him. Their tongues twisted around each other, enticing him, but instead of satisfying him, it only stoked his appetite. Phoebe smiled as their lips slowly parted. It was invigorating. "Good," Jason sighed. As long as she hadn't been hurt, then it was all right. Even so, he felt her discomfort through their bond. No doubt she was still recovering and more than a little sore from the rough way he claimed her. "Let me make it up to you." "And how are you going to do that?" "Well," Jason kissed her, "I'll kiss you until it doesn't hurt anymore." "That might take a while. It might take all night." "Jason, what about that she-wolf?" Phoebe sighed. She recalled the intruder well enough, but her mind had difficulty maintaining the thought with how he stimulated her. Jason growled, not wanting to be reminded, but answered her, "I'll talk to William in the morning. He can deal with her." Phoebe nodded. It was shame it had come to that. She had no sympathy for Camila, but William would be devastated. It was bad enough she tried to force William into marking her, but that she would even dare to seduce Jason, who was happily mated. Not only did the she-wolf have no shame, but she also lacked common sense. "Don't think about her." Jason kissed her before moving lower again slowly, making his way past her navel. Phoebe shivered in anticipation. All other thoughts were quickly left behind. Camila lay on the cot, shivering. She never realized Blue Moon had a prison. The cells were clean, though sparse. Hers only contained the cot firmly attached to the wall and an Asian-style toilet beside a sink also firmly attached to the silver-lined wall. They left her in the minimum security wing where the interior wall was only bars, allowing her to see down the hall and the empty cells across from her own. The pack warrior hadn't even asked her name before tossing her into the cell without a second thought. Securing the door, he left her without a word or blanket, and her dress was still somewhere on the Alpha's floor. The silver bars as well as the walls prevented her from contacting William, so she was forced to stay put through the long, cold night. Memory of the confrontation on the Alpha floor was burned into her mind. Jason was everything she imagined. But with that was also the image of his company, and the way he practically devoured Phoebe fresh out of the shower. The smell of their recent lovemaking was thick in the steam wafting around them. He was clearly eager for more. He had taken one look at Camilla's voluptuous form and flew into a rage. Tossing her aside like a piece of trash, he immediately turned back to Phoebe. As much disgust and anger as he had exhibited toward Camila, he was filled with longing and lust as he swept Phoebe off her feet and carried her away. Jason was clearly wrapped around her finger. How did such a petite, inadequately endowed she-wolf manage to snag the most desirable alpha in the entire world? Here she is. Camila jerked to attention at the sound of the deep male voice. Jason stood at the front of the cell, staring at her through the bars with a look of disdain. He was joined by another, and her stomach dropped as William came into her view. William curled his lip in disgust. "I'll leave her to you," Jason said before departing without a second look. Her guard appeared, unlocking the door, and granted William access before disappearing. Camila stood as William entered. Licking her lips, she tried to prepare an excuse. Before she said a word, he slapped her across the face, causing her to stumble back in surprise. "So I'm not good enough for you, is that it?" William growled. "All that talk about being chosen mates was all lies. You just want to be Luna. You don't care whose." "Of course I care. That's right, you want to be Jason's even though he already has his Luna. She's just a wolfless." Another slap cut her off, stinging her other cheek. "She's a Luna, a true Luna, something you will never be," William growled. "Get back to the room and get some clothes on. There are pups around here." He stalked out of the cell and left her to make her own way back to their room. Her face burned with embarrassment, thinking he would eventually return to escort her, at least bring her something to cover herself up with, but the cells remained silent. Not even the guard came back to check on her. Eventually she had no choice but to accept. William wasn't coming back. Finally, she stood and slowly made her way out, moving along the wall to the exit. A guard stood by but said nothing as she continued past the first gate and slowly made her way to the entrance, where a pair of guards manned the counter. They barely looked at her despite her nudity. With her face burning red, she marched toward the door. They buzzed her out, allowing her to leave without a word. The morning breeze was cool against her heated skin. Her wolf was a whimpering ball of self-pity in her mind, and no amount of prodding succeeded in stirring her. With a disgusted growl, Camila turned in what she thought was the direction of the pack house. Wolves had very little inhibitions when it came to nudity, but Camila couldn't shake her feelings of shame as she finally made it to her goal. Slinking in the back door, smells wafted from the kitchen, telling her breakfast was being served. Breathing a sigh of relief, knowing the hallways would be empty, Camila quickly made her way to the 4th floor and finally reached William's room. She would make that pay. There was one surefire way to put Phoebe in her place. Camila would challenge her for her Luna position. In front of the other alphas and Lunas as witnesses, Phoebe wouldn't be able to say no. There was no way that wolfless would be able to fend off Camila's attacks. Then everyone would see her for what she was, worthless, weak, and rejected, and Jason would realize the mistake he made. He was a strong alpha and needed a strong Luna. Camila had no doubt in her mind that she was that she-wolf. Everyone would agree with her. They wouldn't be able to deny it. "Mommy! Pancakes!" Emma squealed, showing off her plate as Phoebe sat next to her. "Emma, are you getting any of that in your mouth?" Phoebe chuckled gently, wiping the pup's face before rubbing noses with her. "So I heard you had an interesting night," Lucille said, eyeing her to gauge her response. Phoebe gave her sister-in-law a waning look. She wasn't surprised. Rumors were floating around the pack after she summoned a warrior to take the she-wolf away before Jason killed her. It certainly wasn't a pleasant experience to be interrupted in the middle of their nightly activity, but she didn't think it made appropriate table talk, especially not in front of the pups. Lucille seemed to catch the hint and smirked as she sipped her coffee in silence, or perhaps she never expected an answer in the first place. She heard enough last night, and Ben had a long discussion with several guards in the morning. As much as she wanted the information from the source, Lucille supposed she could wait for a private moment. "Daddy," Emma greeted as Jason approached. Smiling, he kissed the top of the pups' heads. His heart swelled with pride to see his family compete: mother, sister, mate, and pups. It definitely made his long wait worth it. "Is everything all right?" Phoebe asked, sensing his inner disquiet. "Yeah, everything's taken care of." She nodded, not needing more explanation. "Alpha Jason." He turned, breaking out with a smile as he reached to shake the offered hand. "Alpha Reed, I've been waiting for you." The other grimaced, not sure if he should be flattered or apprehensive. Jason was never an alpha to take lightly. Now that he was mated, that influence was certain to grow. In fact, Reed could already feel it. His wolf was tucking its tail between its legs in acknowledgement of Jason's authority. It was an uncomfortable feeling for any alpha. But even among alphas there was rank. "Phoebe," Jason reached for her. She placed her hand in his and allowed herself to be drawn out of her seat to stand in his embrace. "Phoebe, this is Alpha Reed of Harvest Moon, the one I told you about. Reed, this is my mate and Luna, Phoebe." Reed's height rivaled Jason's, and his frame was thin and wiry. What he lacked in overall bulk and strength, he made up for in speed. He was not an alpha to be taken lightly, though. Like most in his pack, he was an intellectual. Harvest Moon specialized in medicine and had developed most of the medical techniques packs currently employed. They also held patents on various medicines and equipment that revolutionized human medical treatments. She smiled warmly as he looked at her with undisguised shock. It was clear she was not the she-wolf he expected, and like her wolf, she was amused. "Hello, Alpha Reed. It's nice to meet you. Jason has told me a lot about you and your pack." "Yes, thank you. It's nice to meet you too, Luna Phoebe," Reed stuttered, trying to find his words. "Forgive me, but I wasn't." "You were expecting someone else," she nodded, feeling Jason tense, though he remained outwardly calm. "You know?" "We met briefly," Phoebe acknowledged. "I certainly can't fault her for her taste, but it's rather unbecoming to covet a place that was not meant for you." Reed smiled. "That is very true. I am happy to see Jason has finally found his fated mate. Chloe will be upset. She missed seeing you." "She didn't come with you?" Jason asked, relaxing now that the conversation moved past Katrina. "No. She's almost 6 months along with our third pup," Reed shook his head. Jason nodded in understanding. For as long as he had known the other alpha, Reed had been mated to his fated partner, Chloe. Reed had been lucky that his mate was the daughter of his father's beta. They had grown up together and eagerly accepted each other as soon as their wolves emerged. Jason had always been jealous of him. But those days were in the past. Now he had Phoebe. Jason bowed his head to nuzzle her and breathe in her scent, reassuring himself she was indeed in his arms. He often dreamed of his mate, but he would never be able to imagine her scent. Reed cleared his throat, well aware of a male's attachment to his mate. In fact, he was aching because of the distance separating him from his own. He almost declined the invitation when it first arrived, knowing Chloe wouldn't be able to attend. But the invitation had arrived with a request for a private meeting, indicating a business proposal Jason did not want to discuss through open channels. Blue Moon was a pack that specialized in security, while Harvest Moon's expertise was medicine. They were two different worlds that seldom crossed. Reed was intrigued by what kind of proposal Jason intended. Chloe urged him to attend without her and at least hear the other alpha out. Jason was a reasonable wolf, and whatever he wanted to discuss was no doubt important. Reed was already glad he decided to attend now that he confirmed Jason found his fated mate. With Phoebe by his side, he would become a major influence among the other alphas, so keeping him and Blue Moon as close allies would benefit Harvest Moon. It was clear Jason had the same intention if he was already seeking some sort of alliance. "My mate couldn't attend, so I brought my sister instead," Reed said. "This is my sister, Lily." He turned to the female beside him, who had remained silent during their introductions. She was almost as tall and just as lanky as her brother, standing just shy of 6 feet. Her brown hair was tied back in a low ponytail and seemed stringy, lacking care. She was also pale, and there were dark rings under her eyes. Phoebe recognized the signs, and her heart went out to the other she-wolf. It was clear Lily was suffering from a rejection and had been filling her sleepless nights with research. Before she could greet the visiting she-wolf, another voice intruded. "Excuse me, Jason." They turned to see William approach. His expression was downcast and shamed by last night's events. He thought it was best if he left for the time being, not wanting to sour the mood of the weekend. But as he approached, he was suddenly hit by the scent of strongly sweet bluebells, with a more subtle minty smell. The smell brought him to a sudden halt as he stared at the statuesque she-wolf in front of him. Like the others, Lily had turned at the sound of Male's voice, and now stood transfixed as the scent of sandalwood and clove filled her nose. Jason moved to say something, but Phoebe stopped him with a nudge, a gentle smile on her face. William finally broke his silence with a hesitant question. "Mate?" Lily trembled as she nodded. William finally moved, closing the distance between them, pulling her towards him. He eagerly captured her mouth with longing and tenderness she couldn't believe. She was several inches taller than him, despite wearing flats, but that meant nothing as he eagerly explored her mouth. Jason and Reed stood in open shock. Neither had expected this turn of events. Phoebe leaned against Jason, pulling his arms around her. He sensed her contentment and hugged her close. When the pair finally broke their hungry kiss, Phoebe cleared her throat, saying, "Perhaps you two would like to have your breakfast at a quieter table?" She gestured toward a few tables scattered along the wall that offered a little more privacy. The pair merely nodded and made their way to one of them, not taking their eyes off each other. Phoebe bit her lip, trying to contain her mirth, even as she opened a mind link. "Gloria?" "Yes, Luna." "I know you are busy, but I would appreciate if someone could head to Alpha William's suite and fumigate it. He just met his fated mate, and I don't think she'd appreciate another female's scent." "Of course, Luna. Leave it to us." Phoebe closed the link as Reed spoke. "Well, this is unexpected, I'll say," Jason seconded. "No, you don't understand. Lily was rejected by her first mate," Phoebe nodded. "How did you?" "Wolves recognize their own." Reed blinked slowly, understanding. "You were also rejected." Phoebe nodded, feeling Jason's embrace tighten. He hated any sort of reference to her first mate, but the memory barely stung now. His love and care overshadowed anything she felt before meeting him. She was far more interested in Lily's story. "Her first mate was one of our warriors," Reed explained. "She met him on her 18th birthday. He was a bit of a playboy, but he was also 2 years older than her, which means he already knew she was his mate," Phoebe surmised. "And he still carried on with his relationships," Reed wrinkled his nose in disgust. "He rejected her immediately, saying a warrior needed a strong she-wolf, not some nerd, and she shouldn't be taller than him either." Phoebe shivered at the male's callousness, but the irony was not lost on her. Lily was rejected because of her height, and William feared rejection because of his. Aloud she said, "So what happened to this warrior?" "After the rejection, he didn't change. He flaunted his affairs in front of her. I couldn't let anyone do that to my sister, so I sent him to a pack in Texas we share ties with." Phoebe was glad Lily had such a caring brother. "Lily has locked herself in her lab for over 2 years," Reed said. "This is the first time I managed to drag her out." Phoebe nodded. She was no stranger to sleepless nights, locked in her room with her books after her rejection. Though she never told her parents about it, she was certain they knew. Prior to her rejection, they took most of their meals at the pack house. Afterwards, all their meals were conducted at home. Reed stared at his sister as she cuddled in William's lap. He held her close, nuzzling and kissing her as if in pure rapture. Reed only knew the other alpha through brief encounters and official meetings, so his knowledge was limited. He did recall William and Jason were good friends and close allies, so it gave him some measure of comfort that his sister was in good hands. Though, from the look of it, William had no intention of letting his newfound mate go. "So," Jason cleared his throat, "there is an alpha meeting scheduled later, but I would like to speak with you privately before then." "Oh, but neither of you have had breakfast," Phoebe said. "We'll take something up with us." Jason kissed her temple. Reed hesitated, looking over at his sister. "Don't worry. I'll keep an eye on them," Phoebe assured him. Reed smiled gratitude. Knowing Phoebe suffered a similar humiliation made him certain she would indeed watch over his sister. Perhaps she could even talk to Lily about her rejection. Talking was the one thing not even Chloe could coax from her sister-in-law. Jason gave her another quick kiss before the alphas departed, heading for his office. Phoebe watched them go before looking over at William and Lily again. As her gaze swept the dining hall, it landed on another she-wolf slipping in. Monty pressed forward, eager for the confrontation to come. Phoebe was less enthusiastic, but she wouldn't let the other interrupt the new bond. This was as much for Lily's future happiness as it was for William's. Camila had hurriedly showered and quickly changed into a short skirt and tube top. She had to speak to William and convince him it was all a mistake. His complex about his height made it easy to manipulate him. Once she convinced him no other female would want him, he would gladly return to her arms. Then she would challenge Phoebe for her title. Once she proved Phoebe was nothing but a weak, wolfless human, she would have Jason eating out of her hands. Then both alphas would be willing to fight each other for her, and Camila could pick the winner as her mate. It was the perfect plan. She sauntered into the dining hall, ignoring the stares and snickers directed toward her. Camila wouldn't let anyone shame her. She had chosen her future and wouldn't be satisfied with anything less. Her gaze swept the room looking for one wolf. She figured he would be hiding in the corner, so she wasn't surprised to see him tucked in a secluded nook. What did surprise her was the lean she-wolf cuddled in his lap. His mouth hungrily devoured her, sucking hard on her marking spot. Her lean form convulsed with pleasure, grinding against him, trying hard not to moan out loud as those around them tried to ignore the smell of their mutual arousals. Camilla's face turned beet red at the audacity of another taking advantage of her empty seat. Growling, she moved to confront them, only to find herself pulled away and shoved into the kitchen. Her wolf whimpered, tucking its tail even before she turned to face the wolf who accosted her and found Phoebe blocking her path. Her eyes shimmered silver as she eyed Camila with a frown. "Now, I know you weren't about to cause a scene in there," Phoebe said. "Were you?" Camilla's wolf retreated even further, leaving her to confront Phoebe alone. They stood in the kitchen out of sight of the visiting alphas and lunas, as well as the majority of the Blue Moon pack itself. Only the kitchen staff was present to bear witness, though they kept their eyes averted and busied themselves with their work. "What business is it of yours?" Camila sneered, but shivered under Phoebe's steady gaze. "This is my pack, and I will not tolerate anyone disrupting it," Phoebe growled softly. "I also will not tolerate a she-wolf who doesn't know her place." "William, Alpha William to you," Phoebe corrected. "He has found his fated mate. There is no place for you at his side. There never was. You were only ever keeping that place warm for another." Camila felt her face warm. She wanted to scream, to throw things, but Phoebe's steady, piercing gaze held her in place as her Luna aura made her wolf cower and retreat until Camila couldn't even sense it. "You really shouldn't be surprised," Phoebe admonished. "You knew this was going to happen from the moment you rejected your own mate." Camila stiffened. She hadn't told anyone about her fated mate. He had been the pack's gardener and approached her with a bouquet declaring his love and devotion. Camila had wrinkled her nose in disdain. Fighting her wolf, she rejected him. She knew she deserved better. She deserved to be loved and worshipped like a Luna and pursued William with no second thoughts. When she heard her mate left the pack completely broken, she hadn't shown any emotion or attachment. How did you know that?" "A wolf recognizes its own," Phoebe smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. "It also recognizes those that offend it. Just as I recognize the rejected, I also recognize their rejectors." Camila bit her lip. No one had ever called her out on her past actions before. Phoebe's eyes reflected her amusement. "Your fated mate would have worshipped you and treated you like a queen," Phoebe admonished her. "He's here if you care to see him." Camila felt the blood drain from her face. "He was here? In this pack?" "Don't expect him to be happy to see you," Phoebe cautioned. "He has his second chance mate. She's a nurse and a wonderfully caring she-wolf. They are having their first pup soon." Camila was shaking. How could this be? He was supposed to pine for her forever while she reveled in the love of the pack as their Luna. Her wolf shuddered at the news. For as long as Camila had pursued William, it had pined for its mate. "What do I care about that loser?" Camila scoffed, though she found it difficult to maintain her bravado as her wolf mourned. "Is he the loser?" Phoebe asked. "You're the one who is alone." Camila wanted to growl, but the weight of Phoebe's aura held her in place. I've already asked the maids to move your things to a new room on the 3rd floor. It'll be down the east wing. I suggest you stay quiet for the rest of the weekend and think long and hard about where you will go now. I doubt very much you'll be welcome back at Wintermoon and you won't be tolerated here. With that, Phoebe finally released Camila from her aura and left the she-wolf to consider her options. There were plenty of alphas, lunas, and betas she could plead to let her join their ranks, though they were all aware of her situation. Still, one might take pity on her.